Hello, dear friends. We are sincerely happy to greet you again. Today we will have a conversation with the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Greetings.
Igor Mikhailovich, in our videos we discussed that it is very important not to only abide in love in practice, but also not to lose this love during the day, not to lose this contact with the spiritual world. And certainly, a lot depends on how we spend our day, and even on what we think about during the day. It's a very frequent story when people meet and talk to each other, and being carried away by the conversation, they suddenly find themselves in a situation where they already give sort of negative assessments to people around them or to their acquaintances. There are quite common examples when two female or male friends are discussing a third one, his or her behavior, or when old women are sitting on a bench and discussing neighbors. Situations are numerous. But at the same time, it is very curious that our interlocutors seem to us to be so reasonable and so pleasant, with whom we can talk so frankly, with whom we can pour out our soul. And here is a paradox. For some people, such communication and such like-mindedness brings some additional strength and gives energy, while other people, after discussing a person, understand that, on the one hand, it wasn't them who committed that sin, even when this anger is absolutely righteous. But exactly those people who participated in such a conversation start feeling bad. And a question arises, of course. Do such meetings, such like-mindedness, and such a judgment give strength to a person? Or does it actually drain him?
Well, it certainly gives strength, and quite a lot, but only to the demon in their head. Well, for an individual himself as personality, this is devastating. Why? Because at this time a person is busy judging someone. And as it is said, do not judge lest you be judged.
He passes judgment.
Of course, sure. Of course. The mechanism of, let's say, control over a human as personality by his consciousness, meaning by the demon, switches on in this case. This doesn't lead to anything good.
Very often people begin with some neutral topics, such as nature, the weather.
That's exactly how it happens. They begin from afar and finish as always. The main thing is what? The main thing is to pour out one's soul. Yet what does it mean to pour out one's soul? A simple question, friends. Does it mean to remove conscience? Isn't that what it means?
Well, yes. Where to pour it?
There, that is, away from yourself, so that conscience doesn't torment you when you judge another person. Generally speaking, this topic is certainly interesting. After all, what we do sometimes during the day is not even that. Together with someone we condemn someone else, but we often simply sort a person out. In our heads, judge his actions or something else, and all of that. Those judgments border on that very resentment, anger, and many other similar phenomena of that kind, which are common for us as humans. Yet just imagine we judge someone and waste our time on him, the time of our own life. People simply do not value life and do not care about those minutes, which are really priceless. Do you know why? Because people live like those very animals. They do not appreciate life and do not understand its value. They spend their time in vain. For them it doesn't matter, excuse me, whether they watch TV or read some book, as long as there is something in their heads. Let's say some pictures and some actions. It doesn't matter what they do, and they simply burn their lives away. I mean, they live aimlessly. Hence, all these problems arise. That very resentment, that very hatred, judgments, and all the rest, and an attempt to prove something to someone in one's head. In other words, a person finances actors who judge someone in his head and argue, and as personality, he doesn't take part in that show, so to say. All of that takes place exactly at the instigation of consciousness, at the instigation of the demon, but they are actively living at this time, and the human, as personality, sort of observes this theatrical action in his own head from a side, that is, he watches it like another TV series. Is it aimed at anything good or anything positive? No. Does a person actually spend, let's say, his time, his energy, and his life as a whole at this moment on anything positive, that which will benefit him? No. Everything comes from what? From selfishness. In the literal sense of the word, it is sheer selfishness. When a person tries to belittle or to judge someone in order to exalt himself in his own eyes, not even in someone else's, but in his own, just in order to express his opinion, so to say. Of course, this is ridiculous, to be honest.
People live in this permanent state of anger and resentment for years.
Right.
And people whom they resent may already be gone, but they try to ask for forgiveness. At least in their thoughts, even such a thing happens. How effective is that?
Well, if a person offended someone, that's one thing. This sort of wears him away,
Gnawing at him.
like a stone. Or he was offended by someone and he resents that other person. The principle is the same. You know, there is an ancient wisdom in order to understand how heavy this sin is, and it is indeed heavy, and it is truly a sin. When we judge someone, when we hate someone, there is a simple method. You take a bag or a backpack, and when a thought appears, you start judging someone, you start worrying about the fact that you offended someone, or recalling that you were offended, you take a stone and put it in this backpack. However, you should carry it all the time, and do that at least for a month. Even if we throw little pebbles in there, I don't think that we will fail to fill up the backpack in a month. I don't think so. Most likely it will be overfilled. We'll have to strap on another one in front of ourselves, like a kangaroo.
It's a heavy burden for sure. Igor Mikhailovich, you know, many people said that when they feel resentment, their consciousness craves immediate retribution against the person who has hurt them.
Of course.
They crave both revenge and judgment right here and now. After all, many people really waste their lives on this as well. However, it turns out that at the moment such revenge occurs, they feel a burst of energy and so on. But afterwards, they feel such a deep emptiness inside that they are unable to even get up from the sofa. So badly does this state devour them from the inside.
Well, again, both that very hatred with a desire to take revenge and that very resentment towards someone, all these are the things which take away our life. And the right thing to do here is not to try to avenge anyone for anything. Some will say, well, how can I forgive evil? Friends, no one is saying that. If a person did wrong, really wrong, you should forgive them in the conventional sense, should love them, and so forth.
And love his consciousness.
His consciousness, yes.
His demon, right?
You're absolutely right. I mean, it is out of the question. It is his demon. Meanwhile, a human as personality is good. He's part of you. He's even closer to you than your closest relative. We are a single whole, all together, all of humanity. And until we understand that, we have divisions, hence hatred, judgments, those very resentments, and everything else arise. When you live in this bad state, there's no other way to call it, of either resentment or thirst for revenge or this hatred that is eating you up from inside. You do not live, in the literal sense of the word. You exist in order to carry out this revenge. But what's the point? You have just said, afterwards they feel emptiness. Of course there is emptiness, because they take it out as a meaning, as a purpose of their life, to take revenge on somebody. Okay, he has revenged. Yes, a person may have done a bad thing. I'm not saying that he should not be punished. Anything can happen in life. A person can commit a crime for which he must be punished. Well, there are legal methods and there are other methods, but even if we take, the primitive ones, for example, some nations have a kind of revenge,
Blood feud.
like blood feuds and so forth. That is, those are primitive.
Such primitive mechanisms, right?
Yes, to put it carefully. But what does that give? It brings a person's life to the path of war and hatred, and the person destroys himself with his own hands. He is not so much punishing his enemy as he is punishing himself. Later on, when he has carried out his vengeance, he has revenged. either economically or by means of slandering, it doesn't matter, or by means of something even worse. After all, he feels empty in reality. Why? Because it was all a waste of energy and time. There's no point in that.
Yes, it's true.
A person becomes fixated on matter. He literally ties himself up in a knot on some problem, and he can no longer untie himself and let that problem go. He merges with it, and that becomes his only goal. This is frightening, in fact. Why? Because in this way a person robs himself of the future. He substitutes a goal for himself instead of life, instead of love and joy. He chooses death and hatred. This is a big problem, friends. I do understand when it is the way of life, so to say. When great-grandfathers and their great-grandfathers lived like that, and a person lives in such an upbringing, he cannot even act in a different way. Well, it's hard to say how
Yes, exactly.
a person should act correctly. I'll put it this way. If it is already necessary to punish someone economically or legally, do it, but do not keep anger and hatred within you. That's the point. A person should first of all take care of himself, of his spiritual component. That is first and foremost. But how can you live freely and peacefully and breathe freely if you have a backpack full of stones on your back? A simple question, right?
So by forgiving, we actually free ourselves. We take off this backpack.
We do not forgive anyone. Even if someone has offended us, our forgiveness is, first of all, to forgive ourselves. What does it mean to forgive? It means not to deprive of life. This is true, friends. Do not deprive yourselves of life. Do not carry this burden of resentment, the burden of hatred, anger, judgment. It is wrong. It won't lead to anything good. And look, from time immemorial, saints have been talking about this, right? Prophets talked about this. After all, people knew how destructive it is for a human himself. But consciousness manipulates this. Why? Because it all hurts a person's selfishness, his pridefulness. And those grievances, fantasies, when a person lights a whole fire in his head from these logs, I won't put it any other way. It's really true. These are whole trees in his head.
It's true, the fire of this scorching state,
Of
right?
course, he's on fire, he feels a surge of power, that he is analyzing someone in great detail. But what's the point? Where are you at this time, human? And how can you enter paradise with a pack of burning trees? After all, you're going to burn it down. Who's going to let you in there? A simple question. Well, perhaps the answer is also very simple. You should not be a tool in the hands of Satan. Then everything opens up and everything is easily perceived. Then there is no resentment against anyone. There is just an understanding of why a person acted exactly this way. Whether he acted consciously or unconsciously, whether it was on purpose or, excuse me, it was done by accident. That person could have forgotten that he insulted or offended you. But you suffer and carry that burden. You cannot let it go. That's your goal. Well, how can that be a goal of human life? To hate someone?
He's under control.
Or to argue with someone?
Yes.
Well, this is so unprofitable. It is as if you worked for a month, earned some money to live for the next month, and then you came out and literally threw away all this money, yet afterwards you suffer and agonize. But why did you throw it away? You didn't like it, you see?
The most interesting thing is that our participants also said that as soon as the inner contact with the spiritual world is lost, precisely at these moments, a state of anger,
Of course.
even some kind of inner irritability arises.
This is a marker that clearly indicates whether a person has anything to do with the spiritual, whether he is at least doing his best or not. If in a person there is hatred, there is anger, there is a desire to judge someone, what kind of spirituality can we talk about here? A simple question.
And in this state, a person does not properly evaluate the behavior and actions of other people who are next to him, in fact.
Of course.
I recall that there are studies when, after watching a film that worsened their mood, People interpreted absolutely neutral events in their lives and neutral expressions on other people's faces as absolutely negative.
Right.
So it turns out that when we actually lose this contact with the spiritual world, then we interpret absolutely neutral events as bad, and we ourselves can take unreasonable offense at other people. You know, Igor Mikhailovich, I also recall how Lao Tzu said, "You are controlled by the one who makes you
Who
angry."
makes you angry? Absolutely right, isn't it? Friends who haven't experienced anger towards someone, right? Well, all of us are sinners. The point is simple. Recall the state when someone makes you angry. Or even better, when someone makes you angry, look at what is going on inside you. Because there is nothing but that person. There is only one who annoys you, who makes you angry, who insulted you or did something else. It doesn't matter what he did. What matters is how you reacted, my friend. For that person, it is his life, it is his area of responsibility, and he chooses his own future. The question is different. What do you choose? To be angry? To hate someone? To keep it in your head? To keep another person in your head and to feed him? To feed his demon and your own? What for? What's the point? After all, a human should live in joy, a human should live in happiness, a human should live in God's love. That's the only way he can really live. And this is actually very easy and simple. There is nothing complicated about that. If a thought creeps up on you, which begins to undermine you, like a worm, you do feel and understand that. You do understand that you have already lost love, you have lost contact with the spiritual world. Let's just say you have already degraded to the level of judging someone. What for? Is this really better?
You are no longer a bird. You are already this very worm.
Of course.
Right.
You're not even a butterfly. You're an ordinary caterpillar, which is a fruit eater that is eating someone's flesh. What for? First of all, my friend, you begin to eat your own flesh. You begin to destroy it. And here, as a person who spent many years in healthcare, I would say the following. Any hatred and any anger is first and foremost tension, while tension means spasms, and spasms cause many disorders in the body. So it is also harmful to health. Well, in order not to be ill, either spiritually or physically, you should be relaxed, you should be happy, and a human can be happy only in God's love. Why? Because if there is no love for God in a human, if a human doesn't hold on to God, well, I'll put it this way, if a person's goal is not spiritual salvation, then he has no goal at all. Because Satan foists on him one goal and then another one idea and then some other idea, and the person simply dissipates his attention.
Nothing can satisfy him in the external.
No, a person will never be happy. No matter what goal he sets and what he achieves, he will still be aware that all this is not worth it. It's an illusion. Look at how well the demon works in our world. He creates an illusion of well-being, that when you ascend to the next, if you ascend a step up in the social hierarchy, at least one step up, you will live happily, you'll have everything in abundance, and you will feel good. The key point is feeling good. A person has ascended, he has spent his power, he was well off, and now he is better off. It would seem he can live and rejoice. Question, why doesn't he rejoice? Because whether you are poor or wealthy, whether you are, pardon me, on the street or in a beautiful house, you carry your demon. It doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what conditions you have. It makes no difference whether your body is starving or suffering from an overabundance. It doesn't matter. What matters is what your goal is, where you are and who you are with. That's what is important. If you are with the spiritual world, any trouble is no longer trouble. Trouble is when a person lives, like food for an animal. As long as he feeds Satan in himself and embraces him, this is not life. But when a person has come into contact with the spiritual world, this is where life begins. There really awakens that which cannot but bring joy to a person. And this is precisely what makes him truly happy. It has nothing to do with one's material existence. I think the problem is that people do not realize that they are mortal. That's where the main trouble is. Moreover, suddenly mortal, my friends. And that is really true. A person ends his material existence precisely when he doesn't expect that. It is rare that a person can make it to old age and, as the saying goes, depart in a planned and conscious manner. More often than not, it all happens precisely when you have a lot of plans, when you need to avenge something, to do or build something. When your goal is to live, everything changes. You don't care about this body. It becomes a burden. It doesn't mean you should get rid of it, no. You start using every moment not to hate someone, but to help someone. And even if there is someone who once offended you, and in ordinary life you would just hate him and waste your energy to take revenge, then when you follow the spiritual path, and especially when you feel this God's love, even if someone tries to offend you, on the contrary, you try to help him as personality, not as Satan, without paying attention to his Satan. Just imagine how weak a human is as personality if his demon exploits him so ruthlessly, makes him hate and resent someone, and in fact takes away his life, takes away his time and energy, while a human at this time, due to his egoism activated by Satan, simply does not notice trivial things. Is that the right thing to do? A simple question. Of course it is not.
Igor Mikhailovich, there is also the following question. People are also very much concerned about the boomerang issue. Why does it so happen in life that as soon as you judge someone's actions or behavior, these very circumstances eventually happen in the life of the one who has judged?
Of course, you have actually paid for it. It is you who pay for it, for hatred, for those very judgments. But you pay for it with your life. If you judge someone, even if you do it in secret, you should understand that you will definitely be judged as well. After all, the devil always betrays the one who serves him, because for him, someone who serves him is merely food, merely a tool. The devil doesn't really need your resentments. He doesn't actually need anything from you except the vril, simply your life and your power. Merely that. And the main thing for the devil is to ensure that you, God forbid, won't go to heaven. For him, a human must exist in a state of subpersonality after the death of the physical body. Then the devil gets dividends, income, like a bank deposit. Not at as high a rate of interest as he can get from a living person, but it is still profitable for him. So he is merely fighting for his assets. This is natural and predictable. The question is, why do we behave like satanic assets? Why do we waste our lives? Why do we waste our time on nothing? That's what is frightening.
We invest attention in buying actually the same scenario,
Definitely.
which we condemn.
Of course. If you judge someone, if you hate someone, they also hate and judge you. But what's the point?
You are buying it for yourself.
It seems to me that it's all because of ignorance, really because of ignorance of God's love, ignorance of the truth, of misunderstanding life. A human rolls, like a stone thrown from a mountain. He rolls because he rolls. But a human is not a stone, a human is a bird, and he must fly. And in order for a human to really turn from a stone into a bird, he should attain God's love. Let us, friends, start precisely with that, simply with loving each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor Mikhailovich.
Thank you, friends. Peace be with you.